Thank you for coming to hear about the new cold case grant. I'm Denver District Attorney Beth McCann, and before we dive into the details, I want to take a moment to recognize someone from my office who is very devoted to this grant and this effort, and that is Dawn Weber, who is the Chief Deputy in our office of our cold case unit. Under Dawn's leadership, 5 unsolved homicide cases have gone to trial recently, 3 of which were sexual assault homicides. She and her team serve victims in countless cases by meeting with them and their families and explaining the difficult things like why a case could not be filed, why we don't have enough evidence to support a particular filing of a case. But then she also gets to meet with victims' families when we are able to file a case due to the excellent work of the Denver Police Department as well as our investigators in our office who work really hard to solve these difficult cases. The Denver DA's office has prosecuted more than 120 cold sexual assault and homicide cases to date. Our hope is that soon some of these unsolved cases will be able to be solved and that we'll be able to share the good news with victims and their families that a suspect has been charged and their cases are finally going forward. But we're here today to talk about the fact that in May of this year, the Denver Police Department's Crime Lab crafted a new grant application titled 2019 Prosecuting Cold Cases Using DNA and Other Forensic Technologies. And in September, we learned that the National Institute of Justice awarded $500,000, which the Denver Police Department, the Denver Crime Lab, and the Denver District Attorney's Office will divide among us over 3 years. In awarding us this grant, the National Institute of Justice said, Denver is a leader in cold case investigations, prosecutions, and expanding the use of forensic DNA to improve public safety. We are confident that in awarding this grant, Denver will build on its success and continue producing unprecedented results for a jurisdiction its size that will share as examples of best practices across the country. So we have been recognized at the national level for the incredible work that is done here in our Denver Crime Lab with our Denver Police Department and with Dawn Weber and her team prosecuting these cases. This is now the 3rd grant the NIJ has awarded for a total of $1 million. We believe this continued support demonstrates the trust that NIJ has in Denver, and we are very proud to have earned that trust along with our partners. The new NIJ grant will enable work to advance on solving 72 violent crime cold cases that occurred between 1970 and 2016. The funding will be shared, as I mentioned, among the 3 of us, the Denver DA's office, Denver Police, and the Denver Crime Lab, so that we may proceed on solving homicide and sexual assault cases for which a suspect has been identified, but in which prosecutors have not yet been able to file charges. With this funding, my office will be able to add another deputy attorney to our existing cold case unit, and that person will collaborate with Dawn, the DPD, and the Crime Lab to develop more evidence in these cases to prosecute those which can be filed. These violent crime cold cases are among the most challenging of all cold cases. So the potential to see justice for more than 70 families is really exciting and very powerful. And I'm just going to put a plug in here for my good friends, Chief Paul Pazin and the director, Dr. Greg LaBerge of the Denver Crime Lab, because the work that's going on in Denver is truly groundbreaking, and truly we are in the forefront nationally with respect to solving and prosecuting cold cases. I think you probably know that the Denver Crime Lab is acknowledged nationally as one of the true leading crime labs at the forefront of forensic technology and development of forensic work. So it is my pleasure to welcome Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin, who will be followed by the director of the crime lab, Dr. Greg LaBerge. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. First and foremost, the Denver Police Department never forgets victims of crime. And as we have a dedicated cold case unit, women and men who have dedicated their work to helping solve and bring closure to cases, we demonstrate this commitment. Time does not deter our desire to seek justice for the victims of crime and their families. We continue to search for new leads and new evidence to solve serious crimes. This new cold case grant will allow us to continue this important work, to investigate cases that might have fallen out of the public eye. We know there are victims and families who haven't forgotten what happened, and we don't either. We cannot leave any stone unturned, and we must investigate and use every tool and resource at our disposal. Thanks to our strong partnership with the Denver District Attorney, I am encouraged that we will be able to continue to bring closure to the victims and their loved ones. One of the most critical components of this project is having a state-of-the-art crime lab. And I am happy to introduce an individual who has dedicated his life to helping victims of crime, and that is Dr. Greg LaBerge. Thank you.
Appreciate the introduction, Chief and DA McCann. This project really goes back 20 years. We started really without funding in 1999, really just with Denver Police overtime and a collaboration between the Crime Lab and the Crimes Against Persons Unit back in 1999. And really what started that was a change in technology between 1998 and 1999 when the CODIS database, or the DNA database, was actually founded in 1998. And we recognized right away that change in technology that occurred 1998 into 1999 was going to have a major impact on the ability to solve cold cases, because now we finally had a DNA databank that we could search. So some of the early efforts were made on cases that we had done DNA on in the 1990s, 1980s, pretty much in the mid-1990s, and then actually got that DNA out of the freezers and used the new methods and put it on the database and had some success. So that really started it. It was 1999. We got our first funding in 2003 into 2004, which you've seen mentioned. And really this grant is going to finish it for us. I mean, we're talking 72 cases out of probably, we looked at initially, and Chief Sauniers here, back in 2004, we looked at 5,500 of these. We looked administratively at them to see if there was a potential for them to be helped with forensic science. 5,500 of them were reviewed, and we analyzed actually about 1,000 or 1,200 of them. And we got about half of them matched on the database over time. So there's quite a bit of success the project's had in 20 years. So I'm very proud of that. And this will really complete it. You're talking 72 cases of homicide and sexual assault, violent crimes, and we anticipate in the next 3 years to not have any cold cases anymore. Now, every year that goes by, certain things happen, and there are certain cases that come up that don't get solved right away, so there always will be a cold case in the future. But this will finish our look back into history, back into the 60s and the 70s. And moving forward, I think that's a great thing for the city and county of Denver, and it shows our commitment to our citizens. And I just want to say one thing is I'm very proud of the people here. I mean, this laboratory is at a forefront because of the dedication of the people. And this grant actually encompasses not just DNA, but firearms, fingerprints, any other technology that could help to bring resolution to these cases. And it touches a lot of people in the police department, the investigations units, the command staff, all the way through to the district attorney's office. And what makes Denver rare is that collaboration between these different entities. I mean, you go to other cities, you don't see it as well. You see here in Denver that we really work well together as a unit. That's where the success comes. It comes from the dedication of hardworking people. I mean, I wrote the first grant in 2003. I pulled the first DNA sample in 1999, just working, you know, just having an idea. Well, why don't we try this? And I think that shows kind of that Western spirit to get work done and to dig in, and things aren't really fancy, but we keep quiet and we do our work effectively. So I'm very proud of the crime lab. The Denver Police Department certainly has stood by us all these years in support of this, as well as the district attorney's office as a partnership, and I've never seen anything as good in the United States. So very proud to say that, and appreciate everybody's attention today. Chief?
Questions?
How were you, what was it about these cases that you decided you were going to focus on? How were you able to narrow it down from, over thousands?
Well, you have to, when you're looking at these cases, you have to determine if you have any evidence that's actually probative or has probative value to the case that could potentially change the case outcome in the best case scenario. So if you got a DNA match on a database, would that lead actually have value in the case? So that can be as complex as every case that you look at. So when Chief Saunier's group did that, we had detectives that, I forget how many, Ron, there were 15 or so, something like that. And so we actually worked out a system where we had specific questions that had to be asked for each case to be sure that we were actually, A, that we had the evidence, and we did in a lot of cases, and B, but the evidence would have value. So that was really one of the cruxes of that.
You kind of touched on it, but can you
Sure.
break it down kind of where the money goes? Does it go to like reward money, or to the overtime money, or to the sciences? Because
Sure.
it's expensive to do all that stuff, or storaging of it? Or is
You
there
you
new
basically
stuff that's
answered your question right there. Yeah, you know, most of it is overtime. We have a couple of people that are funded pretty much full-time, but most of it is overtime, and so it's a collaborative effort across the entire laboratory, and actually district attorney's office and the investigators. So supplies for the testing, but the majority is people, right? Is you have to have people doing the work, and we got to pay them to do the work. So the majority of the grant is going toward the people part of it. The other thing I'd like to mention quickly is when the first two people we ever hired to do cold cases in the lab are here, actually. Sean O'Toole's right here, and Susan Burdine is right here on the right. Put your hands up. I think they need to be noted because they were the first two people we ever hired in Denver to do cold case work in the laboratory. They started it. I think we hired them in 2003, early 2004, and they've become great employees ever since and have been with us since 2004, and it's fantastic. So I just wanted to point that out.
Did you run into any issues with old records that needed to be updated or anything?
You know, going through cold cases each one of these cases is a project. It's because you're going back in time, you're getting old records. I don't remember any major problems. Ron, do you remember anything major about records at the time?
No, I mean,
think
you
we
just
had-
have a wide variety of information that you're going through. So you had some cases that had a lot more details, others that didn't, but I wouldn't say it was a challenge. It was just a deep dive into each one of those cases.
Well, when we had files in the lab, there was investigative files. We had to pull that all together. We did it over in the Dill auditorium when it was over there. It was a massive amount of work. We had a computer database that we worked, and this is going back to 2004, 2005, when we basically went through to try to find the cases to work in the lab.
Any other questions?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.